All right, everybody. Hello. Welcome into the channel. Appreciate you for being up this late and watching along. Black and Gold Breakdown, talking everything Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers have made their draft pick. And no, it was not Shedeur Sanders. No, it was not Jackson Dart. It was Oregon defensive tackle Derrick Harmon, which, talking to a bunch of friends closer to the team than I, that are in there every day. That seemed to be the general consensus among them. My buddy Nick Faribault, friend of the channel, obviously Nick does great work on the beat. Him and I were talking, and he said that is who he felt was going to be the pick. And lo and behold, that's who it ended up being. So the Steelers draft Oregon defensive tackle Derrick Harmon, and now we kind of wait and see what happens tomorrow. Obviously, they don't have a second round pick, but they do have a third round pick. We'll see if they end up trading up into the second round. But for the time being, yeah, they've got what could potentially be a really good defensive tackle who is everything that you want in a modern defensive tackle. Good run stopper, but also tremendous against the pass. And we've talked a few times throughout the offseason about what the Steelers want to do and how they want to build their team. And it seems like they want to, do what the Eagles did, which is get really strong on the defensive interior and in the trenches and dominate, which is what they did against Kansas City in the Super Bowl, and a big reason why they won that game. So the Steelers are doing their best to kind of replicate that, and now they have Derrick Harmon to put next to Keanu Benton long term, but Cam Hayward, who is still playing at an all-pro level, is also there. So they have three just really quality defensive linemen to put alongside TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Nick Herbig, and I'm happy with the pick. I said going into the draft that if any of, Walter Nolan, Derrick Harmon, any of those defensive tackles were the pick, I would be completely okay with that. And obviously Harmon is the one who ended up with the Steelers. And now, yeah, we do, there was a lot of speculation of, okay, is it going to be Shedeur Sanders, who did fall to 21. Not only did he fall to 21, fell completely out of the first round. Did Shedeur Sanders, who was still on the still available, and did not get selected whatsoever. So the Steelers completely skip on taking a quarterback. They pass on Shedeur Sanders. They don't take Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart goes to the Giants, who trade back into the first round with the who did they trade with? The Texans they traded with. And so he goes to the New York Giants. Shedeur Sanders still available. Jalen Milroe still available. But the Steelers land Derrick Harmon. And if you want to be part of the chat, let me know what you guys think about it. Derrick Harmon going to the Pittsburgh Steelers, or whatever you thought about maybe some other picks. Travis Hunter goes to the Jacksonville Jaguars after Cleveland trades out of number 2, which I think very few people saw coming. Myself, a lot of people were just kind of penning in the first 2 picks, Cam Ward going to Tennessee and Travis Hunter going to Cleveland, because that's what it seemed to be, what seemed to be the most likely outcome. And lo and behold, the Jacksonville Jaguars give up a king's ransom to move up 3 spots and take Travis Hunter. So obviously that has a big effect on the Steelers because of, obviously Cleveland being in the division. And now the Steelers don't have to worry about Ashton Jeanty, and they don't have to worry about playing Travis Hunter. The Browns turn around and draft Michigan defensive tackle Mason Graham with the 5th overall pick. But let me know what you guys think about the Steelers taking Derrick Harmon, or, your thoughts on any other pick as well. We'll start with Mark, who says, all I can say is thank God it wasn't Shedeur Sanders at quarterback. Doing the AFC North talk pod, the guys were asking me, like, what do you think? Like, would you be okay with it being Sanders? I said, yeah, I'd be okay with it. I wouldn't be like super ecstatic, but I wouldn't be mad. We've talked about it plenty of times in terms of the quarterback position, where obviously it's incredibly important. And looking at this class, wasn't exactly highly regarded as a great quarterback class. But if they liked him, then it would have made sense for them to take him. I wouldn't have been mad about it. This most important position in football, but it certainly seems like they have their sights set on exactly what many of us, myself included, have said they have their sights set on, and that is taking a quarterback in next year's draft. And obviously, look, things are going to change between now and then, where some of these guys that are projected to be high-end quarterbacks are going to have down years where they fall off a little bit. Same thing happened the Kenny Pickett year, where Sam Howell going into that year was projected to be the number one overall pick and didn't get taken until day 3. And so things happen where, yes, this is going into, preseason college football. You look at all the names that are projected to be big names and come out next year: Drew Aller, Arch Manning, Lenore Sellers, Garrett Nussmeier, several other names as well. Cade Klubnik. Statistically and historically speaking, at least like a couple of those guys are going to have disappointing years, fall into day 2, day 3 territory. And so it's not going to be, if I had to guess, it's not going to be a thing where 7 guys go in the first round. And it might be a case where 4 or 5 of them do. But the Steelers seem to be having their eyes set on the draft next year in Pittsburgh to take their future franchise quarterback, as they pass on Shedeur Sanders. They don't take Jackson Dart. They didn't really surprise everybody and take Jalen Milroe. So plenty of things still on the table for Pittsburgh as we enter day 2 tomorrow in the NFL draft. But yeah, in terms of Sanders, man, like, I wouldn't have hated it. I wouldn't have been in love with it, but I certainly would have given it a chance, compared to the Kenny Pickett thing, where I wasn't really doing like a ton of like YouTube content per se at the time. But at the time of the Pickett selection, I didn't give it a chance because it made no sense. He wasn't good, and they still picked him. And I will forever and wholeheartedly believe that they drafted the story over the player there. So I would have given the Shedeur thing a shot. I would have been optimistic about it. Obviously no guarantees on how it would have gone, but it will be, the talk of the draft tomorrow on where he's going to end up. Because if you look at teams like Cleveland, they could still take him. Could certainly still take him. So obviously a thing to keep an eye on. A team could trade up for him. We'll see. The funniest outcome would be like the Dolphins taking him and him eventually replacing Tua. That would be funny. When the Falcons traded back in, I was like, oh my God, are they going to take like Riley Leonard? That would be fun. By the way, that Falcons trade, comically huge package to give in return for James Pierce. That was certainly something. Joey says, is there a way the Steelers can trade up and get Henderson or a Will Johnson? I don't know. I think that if you want to make a move like that, you'd have to almost like give up a player. And the only player really centered around draft trade conversations right now with the Steelers is Pickens. And if you're going to trade Pickens, you're going to use whatever pick you get for him to take a receiver. By the way, still good receivers left. Luther Burden's still on the board. Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State, Jalen Royals, Jalen Noel. Like, there's still plenty of guys that Pittsburgh could end up taking. But in terms of like, they just don't have a lot of firepower to trade up. And Omar Khan talked about that in the pre-draft presser, where he said, frankly speaking, we're more likely to move down than move up. Obviously, they didn't move down Derrick Harmon. They, Tomlin and Khan talked about it after taking him tonight and said, that was a guy that we weren't going to pass on. And it was a good pick. But in terms of will they be able to get somebody, move up for somebody, it would take a lot. It would take obviously 83, probably, then depending on where you trade up, probably a 4th. Like, it would take a lot of juice to trade up. And at that point, is it really worth it? And look, it very well may be, depending on who you try to get, which is why I'm going to, again, keep an eye on the potential that they trade Pickens tomorrow. This would be prime territory for them to do that, especially like a team like the Dallas Cowboys, who still very badly need a vertical threat to complement CeeDee Lamb. I would kind of scratch the Packers off maybe a little bit because they just drafted Matthew Golden, although, they wanted Christian Watson to be their vertical threat, but he's always hurt. And he tore his ACL in week 18. So I think that there's a real possibility that they double down and get another receiver and try to go get Pickens. And if you're the Steelers and you can get another third round pick, and to tie this all into your question, Joey, if the Steelers trade Pickens and get pick 87 from the Packers, then you can package both of your third round picks to move up into the second round if there's a guy that you really want and go from there. Or, you don't have to trade both third round picks. You can trade one of your 3s and a 5 to move up a little bit, or one of your 3s and, a 5 and a 4 next year, something like that, where you get to keep your 3, but also get a 2. So I think it would involve a trade where they would move Pickens to get an extra 3, or maybe hell, they somehow, if they can get a 2 from Dallas, I think Dallas would probably do that. Regardless, I think it would involve trading Pickens first and then moving up. So we'll see. Joey added a future second, maybe. Again, the third round pick would definitely be part of it. 83 would definitely be part of it. But I think a Pickens, something involving a trade with Pickens first and then moving up would make sense. But again, they could just get a second round pick for Pickens. I don't think that they will, but if they would get one from anybody, I think it would be Dallas, because Dallas is just notorious for making weird trades like that. Dallas last year gave up a 4th round pick for Jonathan Mingo. So, I mean, if you're Omar Khan and you're serious about it, you at least call Dallas and ask Jerry if he'll give you his second round pick, and he might say yes. So if you can get a second round pick, that's great. And if you want to take a receiver there, whether it be Jaden Higgins or Jalen Royals or Luther Burden, if he's still there, Kyle Williams from Washington State, that's another name that I would keep an eye on in that situation. You can do that. And then with your third round pick, maybe take a running back. Or if you want to address maybe safety, there's a bunch of different things that they can do should they make some sort of trade. But if they just stay put, I'll be very intrigued to see what they value in terms of their biggest needs, what that totem pole looks like. I've often mocked DJ Giddens, the running back at Kansas State, to them. I think that having a nice combination of Giddens and Warren in the backfield would be really good for the offense. So we'll see. But again, if you want to be part of the conversation, feel free to leave a comment. We'll get you a part of this. I do have a TV spot to do in Vegas here in about 20 or so minutes. So we're going to try to get out of here around like 12:35. So about 10, 15 more minutes before we get on out of here. But again, if you want to leave a comment and be part of the conversation, feel free to leave it. If you have any sort of draft comments, questions, doesn't even necessarily have to be about the Steelers. Feel free to leave it. But yes, this Pittsburgh Steelers draft Derrick Harmon. And Mike Tomlin seemed very excited about it in the presser that he and Omar Khan held directly afterwards, saying that they, weren't going to trade away from Derrick Harmon. They said that he had Steeler DNA. So, this is a guy that they very clearly were in love with and very happy to have him, which, ties back into the quarterback stuff that maybe, was probably just a big smoke screen, because so many people mocked Shedeur Sanders there. Daniel Jeremiah did. Peter Schrager did. Tony Pauline did. So, all of the, big name draft people, I want to say Mel did as well. And by the way, Mel Kiper couldn't stop talking about Shedeur Sanders. So the Steelers surprised a lot of those guys who expected Shedeur Sanders to be the pick at 21. And, he's obviously still on the board, which again tells me, all the, any sort of quarterback talk or, anything like that was all a big smoke screen to distract from the Steelers wanting Derrick Harmon. And, we saw Walter Nolan went to Arizona. And so that was kind of another domino that fell. I think there's another Mason Graham, obviously, was the first one to come off the board and go to Cleveland, I want to say that there was one more, at least. There was a couple edges, like was it Michael Williams went to San Francisco. Shamar Stewart went to Cincinnati. So like the defensive linemen were coming off the board pretty quickly. And Pittsburgh stayed put and got their guy. So they seemed very excited about that. And now we will see what Derrick Harmon looks like as a Steeler. That's going to be exciting. Adam Schefter, by the way, just tweeted out, the notable list of guys still available going into day 2. Shedeur Sanders, Jalen Milroe, Tyler Shuck, Luther Burden, Jaden Higgins, Kyle Williams, Jalen Noel, Mason Taylor, Elijah Arroyo, Travion Henderson, Quinshawn Junkins, Mike Green. But yeah, by the way, Mike Green, very surprised he didn't go in the first round. I mean, the guy who led the FBS in sacks last year was 17. Still on the board. Donovan Azaroku, the edge rusher out of Boston College, still on the board. Carson Schwessinger, Will Johnson, Siobhan Revel, Trey Amos, and Nick Emanwari, all guys that, had been definitely could have gone in the first round, did not. So this is for the Steelers and, for the rest of the NFL. I mean, there's plenty of guys out there that could have gone round 1 and nobody would have batted an eye about it. Azaroku could have gone round 1. Mike Green, again, many people expected Cincinnati to take Mike Green because they needed an edge rusher opposite of Trey Hendrickson. They go with Shamar Stewart, which, by the way, my AFC North co-host Ace was not happy about. So as a friend, it was hard to see my guy crash out like that. But man, there was that run of defensive linemen and edge rushers where the Steelers, may have been in trade back territory if Derrick Harmon had been selected. But they stay put and they get their guy. And now we go into day 2 and we wait to see what they decide to do. Whether it be, a trade, whether it be, just staying put and not getting a second round pick. But look, if they don't, I don't think anybody should be disappointed in that, because worst case scenario, it means, okay, their second round pick was DK Metcalf, which is good. They have needed that talent at receiver, and now they've got it. So, if they aren't able to get a second round pick tomorrow, I know it'll be a little bit disappointing, depending on how you feel about certain prospects or who you want to see the Steelers draft. I know it'll be a little bit disappointing for some, but if they don't, at least you can look at it from the perspective of, okay, well, they've got DK Metcalf. So, look at it from the glass half full perspective. And again, if you want to be part of the conversation, we're going to stick around here for another 10 minutes. I do have a TV spot to do at around 12:45. So we'll stay on here for a little bit longer. If you want to be part of the conversation, leave a comment and we'll get you in here. Goodfellow says, compensatory picks for Russ and Najee or that next year. Those come in next year. So comp picks go on the year after. So they'll get all of those for Justin Fields, Dan Moore, Russell Wilson, Najee Harris. They'll get those 4 comp picks in next year's draft. So they won't have those this year. But again, all of this smoke with the Pickens trade, it's certainly something that could come to fruition. And I know I said on the stream the other day, I was like, I don't think they're going to get a second round pick for him. I think best case that they'll probably get a 3rd for him. But there is one team that I think you probably could get a 2 from, and maybe 2. But the one that makes the most sense for me in terms of getting a second round pick is Dallas, because Jerry Jones and the Cowboys, they always make these odd trades. They traded a 4th round pick for Jonathan Mingo. But they desperately need a vertical receiver to complement CeeDee Lamb. So that is a name that you could watch out for when it comes to the Steelers potentially getting a second round pick and potentially get that 2 back by trading Pickens to Dallas. And I think that would make sense, not, for the Steelers, but also Dallas, who, last year their whole thing was, oh, we're all in, and they did nothing. They brought back Ezekiel Elliott and they signed Eric Kendricks, a linebacker. This is a team that has a lot to prove, both from a head coaching perspective, whose head coach is now Brian Schottenheimer. And again, they need that vertical threat because outside of CeeDee Lamb at receiver, they don't have a lot of juice at all. So that's a team that I would keep an eye on. If it gets done during draft weekend, I think Dallas could be the team to watch. I wouldn't rule out Green Bay, who Jordan Schultz name dropped in his report, his NFL Confidential report on Fox Sports, as a team that was interested. They did draft Matthew Golden. But, the guy who they wanted to be their vertical threat, Christian Watson, tore his ACL in week 18. So he's not going to be back for the start of the season, more than likely. And if he is, he probably isn't going to be 100%. And I wouldn't expect Green Bay to rush it. So I wouldn't rule out Green Bay sending their third round pick number 87 for George Pickens, and then perhaps just moving off of Christian Watson at some point. Or if they wanted to trade, Dontavian Wicks or Romeo Doubs. I still think that that's very much in play because Golden and Pickens are two very different receivers, and they would complement each other very well. So that's something that I would keep an eye on. Houston, still a team to watch in this case. And I think that's the other team that I would maybe keep an eye on for a second round pick, because the Texans, I mean, you look at what they had coming into this draft, they've got a horde of picks in the top 100 right now, and could use one of those to just trade to Pittsburgh and get Pickens, and they would still have a nice collection of picks on day 2. So that's another team where they don't have a lot of juice at receiver outside of Nico Collins. So they could send a second or third round pick to the Steelers for Pickens, or maybe they send a 3 and a 6, a 3 and a 5, maybe, since they do have a big horde of picks over the next couple drafts. Or maybe if you're the Steelers, you say, hey, we'll take a 3 this year, but give us like a 4 or 5 next year. That way we can use that as ammunition to try to move up and get a quarterback. I think that makes a lot of sense. But there are teams that will be, in the bidding for Pickens, as Jordan Schultz pointed out on his report yesterday. So keep an eye on that for tomorrow. And let me know what you think about Derrick Harmon in the comments before we get on out of here. I know a lot of people are here. Ali, good to see you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Did Najee get a bad deal or what? I don't know what the Chargers are doing, man. I couldn't tell you. They are so, to me, they're just built. If this was 1992, I really like the Chargers. Got an elite quarterback and a good run game, but they don't let Justin Herbert be Justin Herbert enough. They rely far too much on the run game. They when Harbaugh came in with Greg Roman, the thing was to shift the scale and take the pressure off Justin Herbert. But now they do too much running and don't let Justin Herbert do enough. They shifted the scale too far. So, they'll be certainly, a fine team. I expect them to be competitive and perhaps go back to the playoffs, but they're not a team that scares me right now as a Super Bowl contender. I think they're certainly a playoff contender, but you don't have any juice in the passing game whatsoever. And at some point, you're going to need to make plays in the passing game if you want to beat Buffalo, if you want to beat Kansas City, if you want to beat Baltimore. And frankly speaking, they just don't have the capability to do that right now. Not Herbert's fault, but he's throwing to the 1956 Boston Celtics right now. It's just a bunch of small white guys out there. Right now, it's Ladd McConkey and Will Dissly. And is Will Dissly even still on the team? I genuinely do not know. But it's Ladd McConkey is his number one receiver. Ladd McConkey is a good receiver, but he's not a vertical threat. He's the guy who eats underneath. And they brought back Mike Williams. I mean, Steelers fans know Mike Williams plenty. At this point in his career, man, what does Mike Williams have to give? Is he going to be your number 2 receiver? They don't have Josh Palmer anymore. He's in Buffalo. It's like, I don't know what they're going to do. I would expect them to address that tomorrow at some point because they need receivers. You can't just run the ball 50 times a game and expect that to be a formula that gets you to the Super Bowl. It's not 1946, man. So the Chargers frustrate me because I think they could be better, but Jim Harbaugh's so stuck in his ways. And I just don't think that is going to get you a Super Bowl pedigree. They need to get Justin Herbert more weapons. So I don't know what the Chargers are doing, but yeah, it seems that they're just going to run. Ali says, keep Pickens. He'll act right in a contract year. Just need to get routes together. I think I'm just kind of past that personally. It's been 3 seasons of him kind of being immature. More so the last 2 years. Like rookie year wasn't bad at all, but second year, 2023 and 2024, like it was just a lot of drama. And I've said it before on here, and people disagree with me, and that's okay. But DK Metcalf and George Pickens are redundant of one another because they do the exact same thing. So I think if you trade Pickens and then you draft a guy to be more of get your own Lad McConkey. You've got right now, you've got your deep threat. You need your underneath guy. You need your prototypical X receiver, while DK Metcalf can be the Y vertical threat. You need a vertical, you need a good route runner. You need a guy with a good release package and a deep route tree. Right now, they just don't really have that. They've got 2 wide receivers who are great at being that, like the 2 of the best deep ball receivers in the game. But you need somebody to do that underneath eating. You can't just be, have your top 2 receivers run deep balls all game. It's just not going to work. Ali adds, love the pick. We got lucky with the positions we didn't need going early. Yeah. And I think that still having that big flock of receivers on the board is nice. To where they can still land one, which would be good. So, yeah, we'll see. Looking forward to seeing what they do. Eagles just did it, ran 2 more times than they passed. The Eagles also have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, who made ginormous plays in the passing game to give them the lead to where they could run the ball late, which is why they ran the ball so much more than they passed, because they were playing late with leads a lot. So they would just run out the clock because they could. The Chargers don't have that. I know that the raw stats will just look like, oh, well, the Eagles, just run a lot more than they pass. Later on in the game, they do. Go watch the Steelers game as a perfect example of that, right? It was A.J. Brown in the first half who had a tremendous game. And then after the Steelers punted with 10 minutes left or something like that, they didn't get the ball back because the Eagles just ran it the entire fourth quarter. So you need pass the ball early and have the ability to run the ball late. And right now, the Chargers have the ability to run the ball late, but I don't see them having a bunch of big leads where they're going to be able to just run out the clock because they don't have the vertical weaponry that scares you or scares defenses to do that. Ali follows up. I just think DK and Pickens will have safety sitting 20 yards deep every play. Look, that's a fair argument. Sure. And look, maybe that'll open up things for, Pat Freiermuth. I saw somebody say something about Calvin Austin. Calvin Austin, I think, is a really good, 4, high-end 4th or a 3rd receiver. But he's a slot guy, and they tried using him way too much as an out wide guy. He's not an out wide guy. He just can't do it. Keep him in the slot. You can send him on deep routes from the slot, but he's not a boundary receiver. So, we'll see what he does. I think that he's good in a complementary role, not a feature role. But we shall see what they end up doing. But I'm looking forward to day 2, seeing what Pittsburgh does, whether they decide to make some sort of big move again in terms of a trade, or they stay put, or if they can pull off a trade that doesn't necessarily involve Pickens. That's also a possibility. I don't know what that would look like personally, but very much looking forward to seeing what they do. I'm excited about the Derrick Harmon pick. If you are watching this, after the live stream, you're not watching it live, or even if you are watching it live, let me know in the comments what you think about the Derrick Harmon pick. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe, share it around to get other people to subscribe so we can have even bigger talks like this throughout the rest of the offseason and during the regular season. On the Black and Gold Breakdown. And not only the Steelers chats, but my national NFL podcast, The Pump Fake, which you can listen to wherever you get your podcast. And by the way, Million Podcasts just named The Pump Fake one of the 80 best sports podcasts. So how about that? Go and listen to it wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to watch more of me and draft coverage, go turn on VSiN. I'll be on in about 10 minutes to talk about the NFL draft with my good friend Joe Serralo on VSiN, the sports betting network, which I believe you can get on Roku and any smart TV. So if you want more of me, I'll be on TV in about 10 minutes. So appreciate you guys for tuning in. Again, subscribe, share this video around, do all that YouTube stuff. We'll be back tomorrow to recap day 2 and see what the Steelers do then. So appreciate everybody for tuning in. Have a great night. Talk to you tomorrow.